Now, we're going to stick with Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing because he has a boxer sign called Edgar Berlanga. And Edgar Berlanga and Diego Pacheco have called each other out, Bryan. Now, it can't get any better than this. A Puerto Rican, a Mexican-American boxer. These two guys in this weight class are very interesting names. But if we're just going to take a look at this matchup right now, what do you think about them calling each other out? Number one. And number two, how interesting could this fight be if we get it?
I hope y'all didn't miss this exchange on Twitter. We're still calling it Twitter, by the way. Diego Pacheco called Edgar Berlanga a dirty fighter. Edgar Berlanga called him a pussy. There was like just a whole bunch of shit going on. They were calling each other out. I think we were talking about this however many weeks ago prior to Edgar Berlanga's last fight, where I was like, he needed to show us something. And the thing with Edgar Berlanga that's interesting is like he's in this position now where he's not quite a champion yet. Like he's not even going to fight for a title perhaps in his next fight yet. He's probably like another fight away, even though he's already like, at that point, 26, 27, you got to kind of already know if you're going to be a contender, champion, whatever the case may be. He's definitely a contender. I think with Edgar Berlanga, that's interesting. He should be fighting for a world title at some point. So should Diego Pacheco. And we have said on this show, they're kind of standing in each other's way in this weight class. Like at 168, of which, Canelo Alvarez right now, he's the kingpin and everyone's chasing him. Jaime Munguia gets the fight. I thought we'd probably go the Edgar Berlanga, Jaime Munguia route first and then see who fights Canelo Alvarez. But I'm perfectly fine with this as if we're not getting David Benavidez, and it doesn't look like we are anytime soon. David Benavidez, Canelo Alvarez is actually the fight that we want to see, that I want to see. But if this is the next best thing, it's Jaime Munguia versus Canelo Alvarez in a few weeks here, because we're talking about May 4th. And then, Edgar Berlanga fights Diego Pacheco, probably, I don't know, let's make it happen, or let's put it in June. And the winner fights Canelo Alvarez in September. I'm okay with that. It doesn't even need to lead to Canelo Alvarez necessarily. I do think it needs to lead directly to a title. Like, make it an eliminator, make it whatever, but like it should be a de facto number one contendership chance, a shot between two young guys who are seen as young phenoms, who are flawed, who are power punchers, who are one's Puerto Rican, one's Mexican, both have their fan bases. So this has to be at a neutral site. I would love it if these two fought. It'd be a perfect fight for boxing nerds, and it'd be a perfect fight to see who's sort of next in that 168-pound division, because they're both standing in each other's way.
Yeah, they'd be East Coast versus West Coast because Diego Pacheco originally from South Central LA, and then you got Edgar Berlanga, who's from New York. So the fight can't be in New York, can't be in LA, it'd probably be in Vegas.
That's not fair either.
Yeah, because it's West Coast, right? I'm being so biased right now. But listen, it can't be in Orlando either. It can't be in Orlando either.
No.
Because that's Little Puerto Rico, and you know that.
Put that shit in Chicago.
That would be dope. When was the last time a fight was in Chicago? I don't even know. Oh my goodness.
That's a good question.
Hey kid, the only place I don't want it to be is obviously Saudi. I don't want it to be Saudi.
Not England either, no offense.
No, we're not.
It's Eddie Hearn, but it's like, like that fight should be here where all their fans are. It's just you got to make their fans travel a little bit.
You got to make it a little bit neutral. I think that would be a blockbuster fight, actually, because both these guys have something to prove. And if they're drawing back on Twitter, which, by the way, we are aging ourselves calling it Twitter, I don't care. But if we are seeing them draw back and forth, let's make this fight happen. This is a fight that can actually happen. And like Bryan said, make it a title eliminator. If you look at the WBO, I believe Diego Pacheco is ranked number 3 and Edgar Berlanga is ranked number 5. Now, both these guys have had a lot of hype on them. I feel like Edgar Berlanga is more known to a lot of people, more casual fans, and I feel like he's more of the superstar in between the two guys. But I think a lot of people know how good Diego Pacheco is, and this could be an extremely good fight that I think could bring in a lot of ratings, and I think it could bring in a lot of money. Now, do I think it could be like the main event? I do, but that's a boxing nerd. Do you think it could be a co-main? Because I don't think it's necessarily a pay-per-view fight.
No, I think it could be a main event, though, if it's like, no disrespect, but if Richardson Hitchens could main event his own card, so could Edgar Berlanga and
And he
Diego
didn't even
Pacheco.
win.
You
Oh
know,
my god.
well, there's that part. Diego Pacheco was the co-feature, and there were people in the comments being like, the reason that Diego Pacheco was the co-feature was to actually drive up the interest for it. And it's interesting. I actually think you can make a case, and I like Richardson Hitchens. I think he's great. He's somebody that I've interviewed before.
The
He's
reason why
from
I watched the
Brooklyn,
card was because of Diego Pacheco.
but like I think a lot of people would tell you, like, yeah, Diego Pacheco should probably be in the main event there, but it seems like Richardson Hitchens is a little bit closer to a title based on his development. Now, to answer your question about last fight in Chicago, or the last relevant fight in Chicago, at least, Wintrust Arena, October of 2019, it appears Dmitry Bivol defended his title. He beat Gilberto Rivera, and Alexander Usyk made his heavyweight debut against Chaz Witherspoon in that fight.
Wow.
Also, Charles Conwell, Jessica McCaskill were on the card. So actually a pretty fun card. I vaguely remember watching this. I definitely remember watching the last two fights. And Eddie Hearn promoted that one. So Eddie Hearn, you can bring this one back to Chicago potentially. I just
Bring it
think
back to Vegas. Bring it back to Vegas. Yeah, I love the Vegas fights. I'm biased though because I'm West Coast, so I just think that this could be a massive fight for boxing fans. And the thing is, I don't know if the winner would automatically get Canelo, but if you look at the WBO, maybe, one of them also potentially gets to fight whoever, Jaime Munguia next, and then Canelo after, right? That could also be
honestly,
possible.
if they made this fight and they're like, this fight is for an interim title, whichever one it is, WBO, whichever, I think people would be like, okay, that actually makes some sense because some interim titles get thrown around like whatever. But this is a fight where an interim title would actually make sense because then they would have to be like next in line to fight Canelo Alvarez. Like I actually would slap an interim title tag on this or an eliminator or something along those lines. But 3 and 5, you're not generally doing an eliminator with the third and the fifth guy based on a ranking, but boxing also makes up their own rules. Like people will probably comment and be like, "Oh, that's not how it works in the sport." And it's like this sport just makes it up as it goes, depending on who the fuck has the money and influence at any particular time.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. And I think this fight, if it actually gets made, I mean, this could potentially be the winner of the fight. Could fight Canelo, could fight Jaime Munguia. Does the winner of this fight a guy like John Ryder, who I think is the interim belt holder for the WBO, if I'm not mistaken? I could be wrong about that. But John Ryder is a name that was popping because he had a decent performance against Canelo Alvarez, gets knocked out by Jaime Munguia, and no one's really talking about him, but still an opponent where I think the winner of Edgar Berlanga or Diego Pacheco, if the fight does happen, they could possibly fight John Ryder and then maybe lead up to a Canelo Alvarez. But nonetheless, both these guys are coming up in the 168-pound division, and this is a very interesting fight. Puerto Rico, Mexican American. I mean, the storylines write itself. Edgar Berlanga, also 26 years old. Diego Pacheco, I think, is 23. These two guys are young, and I think this could be a very, very good fight for the nerds. Now, just for fun, for fantasy purposes, who do you think would win this fight? We see the Puerto Rico flag in the back, so let's take a look at what Bryan says.
I came away like genuinely, and it kind of surprised me. I came away kind of impressed with Edgar Berlanga's last performance because I didn't know what to expect, and he had shown warts and more warts and even more warts in his last few performances, basically since the knockout streak ended. I feel like since that ended, this was his best performance, his last performance. And he I thought boxed better. He actually got the stoppage, which I wasn't sure was gonna happen. Like it was probably his most complete all-around best performance, given that everything else was a sort of lackluster decision or a first round knockout. So by default, I thought he looked his best. Where Jaime Munguia, wrong guy. Diego Pacheco. Look, all these dudes at 168 got to fight each other, so I don't get them confused. Diego Pacheco, that's a joke. His last performance, I thought was fine. I didn't think it was as good as Edgar Berlanga's, having watched it back now yesterday. He definitely looked better than Richardson Hitchens did in the main event, unfortunately, for Eddie Hearn and the zone. But I think I would still probably lean Diego Pacheco slightly, I'd be curious to see what the odds are going to be. I think Diego Pacheco would be priced as a slight favorite, but if Edgar Berlanga, you're telling me he's gonna not only channel what he did in his last performance, but sort of work off that and do something better than what he did against Padgers McCrory. Yeah, I think I might end up taking him to win that fight. But early lean, I would sort of tilt towards Pacheco right now, having not seen any odds or any confirmation that this is going to happen. And also, where it happens matters, right? To me, like if this is going to be in Cali, this is going to be in Vegas, if this is going to be in Arizona,
Ooh,
Texas,
listen, and Texas could be
like
neutral though. Texas could be neutral.
no, no,
You
y'all got
don't think
they
so?
they they got us in they got our asses in Texas. If it's in any of those places, I'm
Actually,
like,
yeah, Diego Pacheco would have a lot of a big fan base down in
yeah.
Texas.
But if it's and look, we got a lot of Puerto Ricans in Chicago, but there's a lot of Mexicans in Chicago too. I feel like you could get
I
a
think
little bit
there's
more
more Puerto
neutral there.
Ricans. I think there's more Puerto Ricans.
Whereas I don't know what the latest numbers of that. But if you put that shit in like New York City, if you put it in Orlando, like yeah, Edgar Berlanga I would probably tilt in his
Very
direction.
much so.
Philly, you know what I mean? I would probably tilt in Edgar
Just make
Berlanga's
it in
direction.
Vegas. Vegas can be neutral sometimes. You know
No,
what I
no, we ain't
mean?
got enough
Vegas.
Puerto Ricans in Vegas.
Hey,
We
he traveled. You did. You gotta travel a little bit. I think I would lean, obviously, to Diego Pacheco. A little bit biased, obviously, but I do think that Edgar Berlanga has a lot to be happy about going into whatever fight he wants to go to, because he fought well against Jason Quigley. He got the win. Right, he didn't get the knockout performance that everyone thought that he would get, but he got it in his last fight against McRory, and I really think that he had a great performance in that fight, and he just has to put it all together and build off of that. Now, I don't know if that happens against a guy like Diego Pacheco, because he did knock out Caceres, and Caceres dropped Berlanga in what, round 9? Right. So that's when people were like, oh my God, Berlanga's chin is sus. But Diego Pacheco, Edgar Berlanga, they both have power. I could see why people would place money on Berlanga. I think right now, he's the bigger superstar in terms of a name. But I think I would lean towards Diego Pacheco. I love the uppercut that he has. I think he is a little bit more skilled than Berlanga, and I think he has the power. So that's where I would lean. Over here at the Mandatory, we want to know how hype you would be for that fight, if you would want to see it, where you would want to see it. Are you leaning towards Bryan, super neutral site, Chicago? I don't know if that is extremely neutral, but would you like it there, or would you like it in Vegas like myself? I'm rooting for Vegas or even Texas. I think that would be fair. Arizona would be a little bit too close for home for Diego Pacheco. But nonetheless, drop your comments below and let us know.